Earth is home to many creatures. Some may even consider a few of them monsters. But what of those more elusive and hidden creatures? The ones we just can't seem to find. Welcome to Monday Morning Monsters. Cryptozoologist and paranormal researcher Barnaby Jones talks about the unknown, mythical, undiscovered, and unidentified creatures from around the world, and the people who have seen them, look for them, and research them. Hear from witnesses about their encounters, as well as renowned names in the field about their work and research. Barnaby is the founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society based in Wisconsin. CAPS travels across Wisconsin and beyond looking for connections between different phenomena and how they can all be connected. Now, your host of Monday Morning Monsters, Barnaby Jones.
Good morning, monsters. How's everybody out there doing today? We have a great show today and a lot of information to get to. A great guest on the show, and I want to get through our opening housekeeping as quick as we can here. So, I want to remind everyone, as usual, the On the Trail of Undiscovered Beasts is streaming now on Paraflix. If you like our show, go check out Paraflix, the Netflix of paranormal streaming. You can use promo code CAPS10 and get 10% off your first 3 months of Paraflix. Up next, we have a store on our website. If you like this show or any of our other shows, Whispers from the Dark or Undiscovered Beasts or our YouTube series, go check out our store, tpublic.com/user/Wisconsin Caps, or just click the link, shop our store on wisconsincaps.com. You can get t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, magnets, stickers, mugs, tote bags, tank tops, pillows, pins, and more. And while you're online, make sure you check out all of our social media on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can find us at Wisconsin Caps or WI Caps on Instagram. And check out our Patreon, where you will find the latest on our new project, Ghost Lab Project. It is going to be exclusively coming to Patreon this spring, and you don't want to miss it because we got a lot of cool paranormal stuff that we're going to be showing you exclusively on our Patreon. That brings us to where we're going to be coming up this spring. We are going to be in Ohio at the Frogman Festival on March 4th. In Mason, Ohio, we are going to be at the Hagood Mill Historical Site for the Haunting at the Mill Paracon, March 24th through the 26th. We are going to be at East Tennessee Paracon in April. We will be at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, Salt Forks, Ohio, on May 6th. And we'll be back in Wisconsin for the Hodag Heritage Festival, May 20th. Then we go back to Ohio for the Small Town Monsters Presents Monster Fest. And that takes us to the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. We have a lot of great stuff going on there. It is a 2-day event. VIP tickets are on sale now until May. You can get involved with that. And the reason you got to get those before May is for the VIP dinner on Friday night with Angela Zabel, Chad Lewis, Christopher Noel, the CAPS team, and our other speaker that we are still waiting to announce. So that's going to be really cool. It's going to be the first time that he's going to be presenting at any convention. So it's really exciting for us to have him, and I can't wait to announce that for you. Otherwise, if you just want to come for the vendors and the speakers, it is Saturday, June 10th, and tickets are available at the door or online. And Saturday evening, we have Angela Zabel will be giving a gallery reading. And that takes us to the MI Paracon in August. And September, we'll be at the Upstate Paranormal Conference in South Carolina. And the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference in September, Glen Beulah. This one is going to be a great show as well. And a lot of cool stuff going on around it, including tours of the Sheboygan Asylum. So if you want to get involved with that, a lot of the great speakers, Lyle Blackburn, myself, Adam Berry, Sarah Lemos will all be leading and helping to guide some of those tours at the event. So if you want to get involved in that, go ahead and get your tickets now, because I know that they will sell out. So hopefully we see you out there this year sometime and get going with that. So we have a great show, and I want to get right into it then. Our guest today is Terry Cullen. Welcome, Terry, to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So before we get into today's show with you, I want to tell everyone, if you have any questions or comments throughout the show, as you know, make sure that you leave them on the platform of your choice. We are streaming live all over the internet. This is a live show today. So if you have any comments or questions, pop them over into the comments section, and we'll get to them in a timely manner. Terry, why don't we get into this? So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, I'm not particularly important in all of this, other than the fact that I am the only person, apparently, still alive who saw the so-called Iceman in a condition of partial defrost, and had a science background to go with it. I was the one who identified it. I was the one who brought it to the attention of science, and paid a price for it. No two ways about it. My background is in herpetology. I am the director of the Dragonwood Wildlife Conservancy. There we go. There's our little logo. We work with critically endangered reptiles and amphibians. I do a little bit of work with mammals, but not much. And we've been doing this since I hate to even admit this, 1964, I think, 63 or 64 when we first put it together. At the time when I was first viewing this creature, we're going to have to go back to that, how all of that happened, but it was 1967 was the first time I viewed this thing, and it was the first time it was ever on display. So going from there, and by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't put in a little plug here saying that we are a nonprofit organization, and the only thing that keeps us going is you. We have a button on our Facebook page for donations. Anything that you can do is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Ever since COVID, we ended up losing so many of our donors in many ways. Help us out if you can. Everything is completely tax deductible. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So getting back to why we're here, Barnaby, why don't you just throw a couple of leading or perverse questions here at me, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. So oh man, I got me all flustered now with your perverse questions.
I'm sorry. Bring out the dancing, girls.
All right, we can do that. So you, like you said, you were one of the first people to bring this to the attention, the Iceman.
Yeah, I wasn't one of. I was the person. Right. Nobody else picked up on it. Everybody thought it was just an exhibit. Here's a little bit of background on this. I always loved to go to sideshows, and I went to sideshows for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were just plain fun for me. Number two, it taught me how not to get fooled. It was always an exercise to figure out how they did what they did, and every once in a while, that dime or quarter that you spent. And yes, that's how much it was when I was a kid back in the Pleistocene. Every once in a while, the two-headed cow was really alive and sitting in the back area chewing on some hay. There was always that 2 or 3% that were real, and they made it all worthwhile. This was the Wisconsin State Fair, 1967. There was a new sort of flashy large exhibit comprised of an 18-wheeler type truck, and it announced that there was a caveman frozen in the ice. Well, off I went, put my quarter in, and a quarter was pretty heavy duty back then, and so fancy exhibit. I got up there expecting to see some crazy rubber model, and I started to look, then I looked some more, and then I looked some more, and then I looked still more, and I remember leaning back thinking, this isn't really happening. I spent probably 45 minutes looking this thing over from top to toe in every imaginable way, in every angle. And frighteningly, it was real, meaning that at some point in time, this thing had been alive, and not in the too distant past. The guy who owned the exhibit, his name was Frank Hansen. He was a carny guy. He was a huckster. And I have to stop for a second and make a point. It doesn't matter what someone's background is. It doesn't matter what someone's educational status is. It's what's there in front of you that matters. And too often we have lost information or lost good leads on unknown animals because folks just weren't paying attention. They, oh, that was just some myth, local people, blah, 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 blah. We have descended into kind of two battlefields. It's like the Republicans and the Democrats. Neither one of them are worth, well, I'm going to watch my language here, but in my particular view, but that's what's happened. There really shouldn't be anything like cryptozoology. 150 years ago, this was just zoology. 150 years ago, they didn't have mountain gorillas. They were nothing but a myth. They were nothing but stories that came out of Central Africa. And this is true of so many animals. There are plenty of animals that didn't exist, but that's the only way you find out what's what and what's not. We need to have people get closer to the middle and start looking at zoology and science in general from a much more measured stance. We have the true believers and we have the true doubters. And for my money, you can pack them all up and send them to a nearby planet where they don't bother us anymore. Their beliefs are meaningless. My beliefs are meaningless. Whatever I believe that belongs in church. That has nothing to do with science. So I go by what's in front of me. I go by what we've been able to touch, see, do. And that does not rule out some of what people call paranormal. We're now finding out, for instance, some of the stuff from the Skinwalker Ranch program, which I have not followed closely, but I sort of stumbled upon. And they've got genuine proof of strange phenomena there. There's no two ways about it. A couple of the guys that are working there are very high-end people. So please, everyone, if you're going to say cryptozoology, try to keep the zoology part first. That it's just been an unfair situation to the people who work in it. They should just be zoologists. That's, I'm a herpetologist. I work primarily with reptiles and amphibians. I work in the medical aspects of herpetology and lots of other things that I have an interest in. I do some human medical work as well. So anyhow, all of that said, let's go back to our creature. I was taken aback, would be a very, very, very minor way of putting it. It was an amazing sight. And to this day, I still remember the feelings that I had as I looked at it. There's some pretty good stuff that was out of an article that Ivan Sanderson wrote. For those of you who don't know who Ivan Sanderson is or was, Ivan worked in zoology. He was a pretty good primatologist and a pretty good zoologist. He was from Scotland, but he also got involved heavily in what we now call the paranormal or cryptozoology. He wrote this article after having seen the creature. And one of the things that I would like to point out right away is when you have a fake, the fake will always have some basis in reality. That's what people use for the model. If you look carefully at this thing, it doesn't have a predecessor. It's neither ape nor human, and nothing that anybody has ever drawn or illustrated before. If it was an ape, people would have made different proportions on the creature. The creature's proportions were unique to itself. That is a word that I hate these days because people are always saying, well, that was very unique and that was remarkably unique. No, it's just unique. It's sorry, but unique is a superlative. End of story. That's you can say thank you for your English lesson later. Thank you. Anyhow, so after looking at it, I talked to the guy who had it, Frank Hansen, and he spun this incredible yarn about it being found floating off the coast of Russia in the Bering Sea, and this Japanese fishing boat found it, and they took it into port in China, and it was confiscated, and it got lost for a while, and then it was found again, and some incredibly rich guy from the United States bought it. And initially, they thought it was a seal that was frozen in the ice. Virtually none of this has any factual basis. Frank Hansen made up a new story every week. And this is one of those instances where I say, just flush everything away and forget about Frank Hansen, because any story that he told you was nothing but an embellishment. Or outright lie. He was a huckster, he was a carny, and there were also a lot of reasons why he didn't want to tell you too much about it. So with that said, I went back in virtually every day that the fair was open, which was 10 days. And Hansen became very leery of me. After about the fourth or fifth time that I was there, he didn't want me in there anymore, and he'd chase me out. So I had to watch for when he would go on break, and he took some pretty long lunches. So that worked out for me. His wife would take over the exhibit. She just didn't care very much about what I did or how I did it. And I would at times get myself in a position where I was virtually laying over some parts of this glass coffin that the thing was in. When I saw it, about 20% of this creature, maybe 18 to 20%, was not under ice. The ice was evaporating. Ice evaporates fairly quickly, especially under the conditions that he had it. The other thing that was very noticeable is that he wasn't keeping it very cold. I think the coldest I ever saw the thing, if you could believe the thermometer he had in there, was 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll stick to Fahrenheit for all the Americans here today. And autolyzing actions by bacteria and also enzymes do not stop at those temperatures. You've got to get much colder than that. So the bottom line was that this thing was slowly decaying. No two ways about it. I could smell it. Even I think the second or third day I was there, when I got close to one end of the I'll call it the casket, there was a small crack in the glass, and you could smell the thing. It was a dead animal. There were no two ways about it. One more thing that proved to me what it was. Each time I looked at it, I tried to take notes. The one thing they would not allow me to do was take pictures. And back then we didn't have really cute little cameras that would fit in our pockets. That was strictly verboten as far as Hansen and his wife were concerned. She would not allow a camera in there either. And that's pretty sad because those would have been the only pictures ever taken and retained of this thing when it had minimal ice on it. There were a lot of body parts that were either sticking out or just barely beneath the ice when I saw this thing. Later on, when Sanderson and Hubelman saw it, and we'll get to that in a bit, the thing had been recoded probably 3, maybe 4 times, and the ice was much thicker when they saw it. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and say, Barnaby, what do you think?
I love it, man. I love it. I know we had some books and stuff. I want to make sure that we're staying on the slides and stuff with what you're talking about. So if you want me to skip ahead or do something, I've just kind of been sitting on that one.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd like people to understand is anytime I do a talk or a lecture, I always bring books. Now, there are those of you who may not remember those things. They're made primarily out of paper. But please stay off the internet unless you have to. I'm going to give you a series of books here that are important to what I'm saying. It doesn't mean they're all great books. A couple of them I put in there because they're not great books. Here we have Unscientific America. Let's just, if you want to just breeze through those, I'll give you a go through. Search of the Red Ape. Barnaby, that is a particularly important book to what we're talking about. We'll go into it later.
Okay.
Next one.
Oops. Hang on. Skip one. There you
go. Okay. Myths, Lies, and Downright Stupidity. Sounds like our current culture. A good slam to today's society and the incredible ignorance that we're exposed to and reveling in. Damned Lies and Statistics, a wonderful book, and he published a sequel to it, More Damned Lies. And this is a man who really is a fine statistician, and he teaches you how not to make stupid mistakes. He teaches you how to use statistics genuinely, not to fool people or advance your particular ideas or ideals. Next, please. Search for the Golden Moon Bear. Golden Moon Bears didn't exist. Well, guess what? They did exist. Cy Montgomery is just a great lady. If you've never had a chance to read any of her stuff, she has been out there looking for things for a lot of years. And, you know, I'll be damned if she didn't find the Golden Moon Bear. This was an animal that was unknown to science, and eventually she was able to prove that it existed and photograph live specimens. It took a long time. Interesting story, a great adventure. Next, please. Oh, yeah, The Logic of Real Arguments. It's an excellent book. And again, teaches you how to use your head for something other than catching rain or flies. It's a great book. The title speaks for itself. The Dumbest Generation. We're living in it. Thank you very much. Next, please. Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. This is a book done by Ivan Sanderson and was the first really big treatise done. It's quite a large book, and well done with what information he had. He was a bit sensationalistic, but it's a very valuable book for those of you who are interested in Yetis, Sasquatch, and the like. Next, please. Sway. You can read that one. We can go to the next one. Just read the subtitle. It tells you everything. This is the book that Bernard Heuvelmans published when he described the so-called Iceman. He referred to it as a living Neanderthal. This is in French, Belgian French, and it was eventually partially translated. Okay, next, please. Still living. Myra Shackley. Interestingly, she was I believe Myra is still with us. She was an anthropologist, quite skilled, and wrote several books on the non-human hominids that she believed were still in existence in Mongolia and nearby Nepal, Bhutan, and so forth. Interestingly, like so many other people, fatal flaw. She made one mention of the Iceman, said it was just a fake, something that appeared on the circus grounds and Midway grounds. That's all there is to it. Almost everything that's been written about the Iceman comes down to one thing. It's nothing but a fake. It was nothing but a carnival, this, that, and something else. Ironically, it's one of the few pieces of cryptozoology that we have that was actually real. The people who said it was fake never saw it, never had hands on. One of the things that I did, and I managed to do without getting the ire of Hansen's wife up, was I brought in hand lenses. I had 3 different ones. And if I remember correctly, I had a 5 power, a 10 power, and a 20 power hand lens. I looked at that thing through those hand lenses over and over and over again. And there were some very, very important bits and pieces that I was able to ascertain using those hand lenses. Okay, next, please. Pickled punks and girly shows. This is written by a Carney guy who knew Hansen. Hansen never wanted to admit that this was real. He would always dodge that question. This was a buddy of his, a younger carnival guy who wanted to make one of these creatures. He eventually did out of synthetic materials, but it was modeled after the original Iceman. It was probably the best fake that was ever done. In the whole process, he assumed that the whole thing was fake with Hansen, and I don't know that he ever got to see the original carcass. I can't recall if he did or not, but he knew Hansen, especially when Hansen was in his dotage. Hansen was losing clarity pretty well when this fellow got to see him. It's a fun book. It gives you some information about the Midways and so forth and some historical stuff. But once again, the information that's on the Iceman is just simply wrong. Next, please. Bring that one up. Oh, this is a great book by Academic Press. The Structure and Function of Skin. This was a very important book for me over the years. Allowed me to discern not just from the Iceman thing, but some of the work that I did with reptiles. Very, very helpful book. Very helpful. Great treatise. Is that it for us? Yeah, we got the whole bunch here.
A group shot.
Okay. If you want to know any more about these things, I'm sure Barnaby can give you something off air at another point in time or what have you, whatever resource he has to get in touch with you or you get in touch with him. We won't waste any more time on it.
Absolutely. We are going to take a quick break here and we'll be back, and let's delve right into more about the Iceman with Terry Cullen here, and the man who tried to bring it to the attention of the scientific community, though reluctant as they were. So we'll be right back after the station break.
Certified psychic medium Stephanie Lynn creates an authentic connection between the living and the spirit world. Stephanie knows she is here to help heal, educate, and provide validation that there is more after death, and allows herself to be a conduit and work as a team with spirit to pass on messages from their world to ours. Stephanie Lynn also works as a spiritual life coach to help you achieve, create, and manifest your best self and life. Looking for help communicating with an animal? Searching for a past life regression therapist? Or dealing with a paranormal experience? Stephanie Lynn is here to help. For a list of full services, visit her on Facebook under Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive. That's Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive.
All right, guys, we're back here on Monday Morning Monsters. I'm your host, Barnaby, and joining us today is Terry Cullen. I want to remind everybody, if you guys have any questions throughout the show, feel free to throw them up in the comments section wherever you're watching this. We're live, so if you have a question for Terry about the Iceman or any of his work with herpetology or anything else, feel free to leave it in the comments there. And with that, Terry, we're back here with the slides. This is slide number 1. But before we get back into that, I know that you had said off air that you had some people that you wanted to thank as well, and I wanted to make sure you got a chance to do that.
I do. I'll run through this very quickly, but these are people who have been very important to our conservancy and other things that we've been involved in. They are in no particular order, so please don't anyone think that you're being slighted by being at the bottom or top of the list, or that you're being aggrandized. First of all, Mr. T. Krulos, he has been incredibly helpful in all of this. I am technologically stupid, like many people my age, and he's been of great help. Sheila Komchek, most of these people, I'm just going to leave first names. Jane, Rachel, Melissa, Amanda, these are all volunteers. Des, Brad is my manager of my facility down in Florida. Eric, a long-term friend, and has helped out many a time. He was also sort of an understudy for me. Zane, young man from Florida, has been very, very helpful. This gentleman is known as Zippy. His real name is Richard Gregornis, and he has actually been working on a book about Ivan Sanderson. And my friend Dick, who has helped me with numerous bits, pieces, and projects. So all of you, couldn't have done it without you, and I really, really appreciate every single one of you.
Awesome. I firmly believe in that, and giving credit where credit is due. So I'm glad that you got a chance to do that, and I want to make sure that we reminded you too. So
okay, let's go back to our Iceman. So I got in touch with a gentleman who I knew who was just graduating from Marquette Dental School, and one of the questions that I had was whether that jaw that I was looking at would work. What we're looking at right now is just the Abominable Snowman book by Sanderson. Just another view of it. I think we're going through the books.
These are the slides, so I just wanted to make sure in case you had anything else you wanted to add.
You can jump through the next ones. That very crazy GI we'll talk about. That's a letter that I wrote to Ivan. I still have copies of some of that stuff. So, but that's sort of getting ahead of ourselves. So if we can back out of the slides for a minute.
Sure.
And we'll talk about the creature. I wanted to find out if that jaw was a legitimate jaw arrangement. You can tell a lot by the way things are put together, especially if you know how they should be put together and what it takes to make them work. This friend of mine had just graduated dental school. He was pretty fresh out of the out of the gate, but he was a smart guy, and he was very interested. He had planned on going into working with temporal mandibular joint problems and so on and so forth. So he was really a great choice for this. And he went, looked at it with me, did some sketches. That night we sat and spent several hours picking it apart. When I first saw the Iceman, if you want to call him that, the mouth was partially open, and you could clearly see the two big incisors and the left canine. You could see bits and pieces of the other teeth. The creature had a grimace on its face, if you could call it that. The incisors were very much like an orang's. They were not quite as big, but they were very much like an orang. That the canine was not like an orang. It was much smaller than an orang's canine. But what was important to us was whether or not this jaw could actually work, whether it was functional. And when we got all done and spent several hours messing around with that, it was his view that that was an eminently workable jaw. From what we could see, the musculature, in some cases through the ice, in some cases not through the ice, even the areas of the lips. And by the way, it had very, very narrow lips, almost non-existent. But the lip area, all of that was in every way, shape, or form legitimate, as far as we could tell. Things that were very interesting, things that were very important. Number one, this animal had parasites on it. You know anybody who makes fakes with parasites? That's absurd. The quarterbacks, as I call them, the weekend quarterbacks who pronounced this a fake over and over and over again, never, ever got to examine it, never bothered to. They were sure that this was nothing but bunk. And this is very ironic because most cryptozoological stuff, when we get down to the nitty gritty, it's real. Oh, it's fake. And, that's all part of research. Most of the stuff is going to be fake or, something other than what you think it is. This was ironic because it was just the opposite. It's fake. You know what? It's real. The reason I'm coming out and doing these talks now, and by the way, I am available for doing talks on this. I just did a talk for the Wisconsin Mensa group, and I will be putting this together as a formal talk within the next couple of weeks to go out on the road, we hope. We've got something where we actually had the carcass. We had the only known recent remains of any non-human hominid. The only one. That's it. We've never had anything else. Sadly, we no longer have it, but that's another part of the story. Okay, so let's go back to some things. It had at least one tick on it, and it had one louse on it, and it also had the exoskeletons. Lice shed their exoskeletons. It had exoskeletons in a couple of places from lice. The next thing is it had a lot of imperfections in the skin. When you make a model, you don't sit there and freckle it and put an imperfection here, a small scar there, so on and so forth. It had lots of imperfections all over its body, what you would expect from something that lived out in the wild. Okay, next thing is the left eye was hanging out of the orbit, and it was you could identify virtually all the structures in the eye except for one muscle, and that was behind the eye where I couldn't see it. But 3 of the 4 muscular attachments of the eye I was able to see pretty darn clearly. And again, who makes something fake and then blows the living hell out of it? There was a great deal of blood in the ice, and the right eye was missing completely. Eventually, it was hypothesized that and not by me, but by someone who knows a lot about ballistics, that it had been shot with a high-powered rifle through the right eye. The back of the skull, what we could see of it, was blown out, and there was brain material hanging in strings and chunks back there. Again, how do you do that? Why would you go through that kind of trouble? This next one is particularly important. Every hair had a pore. In other words, every hair on this animal's body had a pore. However, not every pore had a hair. That's a normal condition. Hairs are shed. And at any given time, there's always a certain percentage of pores that don't have any hairs in them. When people recreate models, even some of the best ones, like a gorilla in a museum where they tried to stay just as authentic as possible, you'll never find a pore that doesn't have a hair. There's no reason to put it in there. That's just silliness. The toes, the two that I could see clearly enough, had whorls on them. That translates to fingerprints. I couldn't see whorls on the fingers, although it appeared as though they were there. The animal had a broken left arm. It was a compound complex fracture, and you could see the marrow seeping out where this thing was fractured. Another thing that's virtually impossible to fake. If anybody faked this or put this thing together, they had technology far beyond anything that we have today, much less 50 some years ago. Okay, those are some pretty compelling things. Finally, we talk about the odor from the animal autolyzing. Autolyzing, again, is just when something is decaying, it's rotting on its own. No question about the fact that this animal was autolyzing and that Hansen didn't know enough about freezing things and keeping them in a cryo situation. So with all of that said, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run down a description of the animal. But before I do that, Barnaby, do you have anything you want to throw in here or ask about? I don't want to monopolize the show here.
No, that's fine, man. All amazing information, very good points about, why this thing is actually real. I mean, you got to take a really good look at it, and that's awesome. I know I know where the story's going, as I heard your presentation in the Milwaukee Paracon with T there. So I think we're going to get to information that'll better get to this question, but we have two over here in the comments. Now, this one says that he saw the exhibit at the Nebraska State Fair in Lincoln, Nebraska. His best guess was the fall of 1967 or 1968. And he says the last he heard the exhibit was at the Museum of Weird in Austin, Texas. So I guess the first part of this I would ask you is, do you think that this was still the original creature in 67, 68, or had it been replaced at that point?
I would have to know the exact date in order to tell you for sure. But what I will tell you is that whole thing about it being in the Museum of the Weird, that is an old rubber copy that was laying in a freezer for a long time, an abandoned freezer in a shed. Hansen owned it. Hansen had at least 2, possibly 3 copies made of this creature. And it was an obvious fake. If you had seen the original and you had any kind of background at all in medicine or anatomy, the fakes were just obvious fakes, absolutely obvious fakes. And time again, I had to listen to. I honestly just got so sick of misinformation being out there that I finally decided I'd take it on the chin and go out and say, look, guys, whatever it was real. I'm not telling you it was this. I'm not telling you it was that. Although we'll get to that in a little bit. Yep. I'm going to run through the animal really quickly here. What's the other question, please, Barnaby? Well,
like I said, I knew that you were going to get into when it was replaced and stuff. So, I wanted to know if you knew if that was the original at that time. The other question is, do you get paid to do these talks? I guess he's wondering, how can he reach out to you if he wants to bring you in for a convention or something?
Yeah, I'd sure like to get paid for these talks because we are a nonprofit group. It would be a donation. I wouldn't be paid personally, I would ask for a donation for our conservancy. And that's, perfectly legitimate question. And as I said, our conservancy, being a 501c3, everything is tax deductible. Okay, let's run through the Iceman here. Medium length brown and black hair. I went through the pores already. The hair appeared to have a matrix under magnification. The nails were chipped, grimy, discolored. Again, a creature that lived in the wild. The skin, lightish skin with melanin spots, small scars, lots of imperfections. Shoulders, rather broad and powerful looking. It was barrel chested. The arms were muscular, and although they were quite long, they're still probably within human range. The hands were very large with relatively slender fingers and thumbs. The thumbs were opposable, but not as opposable as human thumbs are. The legs were somewhat short, but still within human range, very muscular. The feet were relatively large, hair covered, and quite wide. All toes facing straight forward. Dermal whorls were present. The head, very hominid. Pug-nosed. Nose hairs were present, and that's another one. Does anybody put nose hairs in a fake? Very little facial hair, extremely narrow lips. The teeth, I went through that already, the incisors and the canines. There was also detritus in the teeth from whatever the last meal was that the animal had. Very obvious that you could see. That a very short neck. The penis was rather small, but it was larger than a gorilla's. Had a complete foreskin. So there's a good run through of it. One of the things I keep hoping is somehow, somewhere, a little bit of the blood from that thing ended up either at Hansen's property or somewhere that still exists. Because with just a little bit of that and doing some DNA and RNA work, we could come up with some answers. Sadly, I don't know about that. Hansen only has one or two living relatives. I believe he has a son and a daughter. I know he has a son. I believe he also has a daughter. Might even have two daughters. The other thing is, in the ice, you saw bubbles coming up. And that's from the autolysis, from the animal decaying. There were bubbles coming up all over the place. Shortly after I saw it, it was again coated with ice. Okay. What did I do? I tried to get some anthropologists who were interested in it, and I sort of started at the bottom and worked my way up to the top, and I couldn't get anybody to listen to me. I was a 17-year-old kid, and as far as they were concerned, go away, don't come back. And I had a few polite refusals. I had a few that weren't very polite. I talked to at least 8 anthropologists and probably 3 or 4 primatologists, all of whom said no bueno. They wouldn't come look at it. I offered to pay their way. I offered to pay their transportation. I'm just a kid at this point, I'm going to take my little savings account and put it on the line and say, here, I'll buy your way in. I'll get you where we need to go. I'll drive whatever it takes to get you there. At this time, Neil Tappan, who was very, very well-known anthropologist, was doing a stint at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I finally went to him and went in his office and sat with him. And I out of sheer frustration, put my hands on the desk and said, look, what if it's real? And he just looked up at me and he said, yeah, what if it's real? And I quickly understood that I was the victim of the arrogance of science and the fear of losing one's reputation. He was pretty close to retirement at that time. Didn't want any part of it. So I started reaching further and further, and I finally got a hold of Dr. George Agogino, who was on a dig in, I believe it was Arizona, for the Hopi Indian project that they were doing. He was extremely nice, and he tried to refer me to some other people. He said I'd come out in a second to take a look at it, but he was under contract for that dig, and he wasn't allowed to get out of there for any length of time. He gave me a couple of other leads. No good. They wouldn't come. I had known about Ivan Sanderson. I knew about his book. I owned the book. I thought, okay, we're gonna go full tilt here. Got a hold of Ivan, and he listened very carefully and grilled me like crazy for about an hour and a half. And it might have even been 2 hours. I don't recall. We're going back over 50 years here. And when we got all done, he wanted me to send him a letter, and I did so. And I also gave him some other information about some things that I had been working on. He was interested in lots and lots of different undiscovered species or animals that were thought to be extinct. Just as a caveat, in my lifetime, I have found or identified, probably better word, at least 3 species of megavertebrates, crocodilians. I have rediscovered animals that were thought to be extinct. Examples are bufo lemur, the crested toad, the Jamaican iguana, which was thought to be extinct, and probably at least another 3 or 4 others. So I'm not new to the game, okay? And I've been out there, I've been doing my work, and have something of a reputation internationally, at least, for being reasonably clever at what I'm involved in. So Sanderson, in a second phone call, lets me know that Bernard Heuvelmans, the so-called father of cryptozoology, is staying with him. It's the first time they'd ever met in person, and they're going to plan a road trip. So they wanted to know how to get a hold of Hansen. I went through a bunch of work to get an address for him. He lived out in bum nowhere, Minnesota at the time. To show you how far out, he only had a 4-digit phone number, if I remember correctly. So it was a long time ago. But anyhow, I managed to get them in touch with each other. Eventually, Hansen sort of grudgingly allowed them to come out to take a look at the thing. They got there. Hansen was not exactly a gracious host. Hansen was a former Air Force person. He was still in reserves. This is during the Vietnam War. So everybody, please keep that in mind, because that's important, very important. Hansen gave them another story about how he found it, where it came from, and so forth. I know at least 7 versions of that story. Time and time again, he changed it around. Eventually, he claimed that he had shot it in Minnesota. Not one of the stories is true. There's nothing that I can find any proof for in any of the stories that he told. So again, I just dropped everything that he said and started doing my own looking around, checking up and what have you, and trying to put something together to figure out what this was and where it came from. In the meantime, Sanderson and Heuvelmans are taking photographs of it. Again, remember, it had been recoded probably at least 3 times. The ice was relatively thick, but even through that ice, they were able to ascertain that everything I had said was true and then some. Heuvelmans did a formal description of the creature, named it Homo pungoides. I didn't necessarily disagree with that. I thought there was more than enough evidence to give the thing a name. I will just back out for 1 second. I gave a talk at Spooky Empire down in Florida, just a warm-up talk about the Iceman. And the next morning, I had some guy come up to the booth. We had a fundraising booth for the Conservancy there. And thank you, Spooky Empire, and also MegaCon for your continued support. They have been very nice to us and allowed us to put up a booth and have a great time with their audiences. But this guy came up to our booth before we were open, and he's waving his hands and he's yelling at me and he's slapping his hands and essentially calling me a fraud. And I don't know who the guy is. Later on, I found out that he had some sort of talk or panel that he was giving there on Sasquatch. But I mean, this is a great example of why we never seem to get anywhere. There are far too many people like this involved. People who just shouldn't be. People who live by their emotions rather than doing the work that they should. The real endangered species here is critical thinking. That's the real endangered species. Most people have no clue either what it is or even how to spell it. We need to get that back in our schools, and we need to get going on it quick, or we're going to lose it forever. So Sanderson, Heuvelmans, they're looking at this thing. They're taking photographs. Heuvelmans, this was back when you had to have very bright lights for taking good photographs. And Heuvelmans got one of the lights too close to the casket that the thing was in, and the glass cracked, and put a pretty good sized crack in the thing. And immediately the air was just filled with nauseating stench from rotting animal. Hansen freaked out, and he essentially told them they could go now and didn't want to see him again. They had asked him a lot of questions, and he gave them a lot of nonsense answers. Well, the next thing that happens is Bernard Heuvelmans said, "This animal belongs to science. You shouldn't have it. And if you don't give it to science or give it to us, I'm going to report you to the authorities. And I know in the United States, it's a federal offense to take a dead body over state lines." Hansen absolutely went crazy, kicked out both of them, Sanderson and Heuvelmans. And shortly thereafter, I'm not going to go into time sequences here because it would take way too long. It's not worth going into. But shortly thereafter, Hansen packed the thing up in a truck, disappeared with it, and Hansen did not reappear for quite a while. That was the last anybody saw of the actual carcass. No one knows what happened to it. The only person who may have an idea is possibly his son. It was just a damn shame. It really was. Sanderson was furious with Heuvelmans. Sanderson had been around Carney people. He knew how to deal with them. He knew how to be friendly. He knew how to be complimentary when it was appropriate. Heuvelmans had no such finesse. He just came at him with a sledgehammer verbally and scared the guy, and off he went. We came to learn later that there were a lot of reasons why Hansen was afraid of people finding out about this thing and checking it over too carefully, because of where it likely came from and under what circumstances. So, with that said, Barnaby, what do you think?
I think that whole situation could have been handled a lot better. It's just such a shame that somebody overreacting cost the scientific world such a amazing piece of history and scientific discovery. And yeah, we do have to take a break at this top of the hour here, and we'll be right back after this real quick station ad. If you guys have any questions for Terry, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll address them right when we get back. And we'll see you after the break.
Come see our new station shop for some amazing top quality merchandise. There is something for everyone, like blankets, electronics, clothing, and much more. Head on over to WLTK-DB.com and click shop to show your support by sporting our logo. The WLTK-DB Station Shop at WLTK-DB.com. Paranormal talk is our business, and business is good.
back here live on WLTK-DB Talk Radio with Terry Cullen. Terry, remember that comment that we had earlier about the guy that saw it in Nebraska? And that's as I said, when you were just got done telling about how it got replaced, that's why I was wondering if he would have maybe seen the original or one of the copies. So
yeah,
that's where I was going with
I don't know unless I knew the exact date of when that state fair was. Then I could probably give a guess at it. But I do know that right after he left Milwaukee, he recoded the creature. He went from Milwaukee to Minnesota. I'm skipping lots and lots and lots of information here. He went to Minnesota. I followed the damn thing to Minnesota. I got an anthropologist in Minnesota, a young anthropologist, to come and see the thing. By the way, there's an Unsolved Mysteries episode about the Iceman, and it's actually pretty factual because they allowed me to be the person who vetted the information about it. Anyhow, this young anthropologist, I finally convinced him to go see it, and I stayed out of the area because I didn't want Hansen seeing me and then put two and two together and kick him out. He came out about 15, 20 minutes later, and we had agreed to meet at an area right near this exhibit. The guy's walking along, and he's walking along like he doesn't even see me. And I finally said, "Hey, what do you think? What do you think?" And the guy just shook his head and just said, "Incredible, incredible." And I walked in front of him again. I said, "What is it? What do you think this is? What are we looking at?" Just kept slowly shaking his head, saying, "It's incredible. It's incredible," and walked away. That was it. And I remember being absolutely in tears. Here I finally get somebody with some kind of background and credentials to look at the thing. This was unbelievably disappointing for me. And I had about given up on the world at that point. He obviously was very impressed. A number of years later, I looked him up because I wanted to sit him down and say, "Okay, now that you're over your shock or whatever it was that was going on, I want you to tell me what you thought." I found out that the guy had been killed. He had gone on a research junket to Central America, climbed one of the pyramids and got struck by lightning at the tip of the pyramid. It was like, oh, can anything else happen with this? Yeah, wow. Really? This was after the whole Heuvelmans and Sanderson debacle. So anyhow, what do we think it is? I'm going to tell you that I'll give you about an 85 to 90% on what I'm about to tell you, as far as this is what it actually is. And it goes back to Vietnam. Hansen had access to airplanes. He was a pilot, and he also had access to supplies and supply sergeants where they could ship anything they wanted anywhere in the world. Nobody ever questioned it. Put it in a body bag, off it went. I mean, I don't know how many tons of heroin came into this country in body bags. Lots of people made lots of money doing that during the Vietnam War. But here's the thing. In Vietnam, the Marines had encountered an animal that they called a rock ape. Nobody believed them. Well, then they started to encounter these things more and more and more often. There are a bunch of, thank you. That's the right one. Boy, I'm gonna have you work with me all the time.
I pay attention.
you are the best, baby. Okay. Anyhow, in this book, Very Crazy GI, they recount encounters with the rock apes. Now, our people were not the only ones who encountered them. The Vietnamese army and Viet Cong encountered these things as well. And as a matter of fact, the Vietnamese put several scientific expeditions out looking for it. They were able to find footprints. They never actually found the creatures. It seems as though there were two groups of them still extant, and they were probably, only a few left, living in the highland areas of Vietnam. I'm going to skip a lot of information about exactly where this was or exactly where that was or exactly what year. But I will tell you that the Vietnamese sent scientists out at least 3 different times looking for these creatures. The locals, as in the native people that lived nearby, knew about these animals and had no question about their existence. It was just, they were strange. They had a tendency to throw things. Rock ape came from not the fact that they lived in the rocks, but because they would throw rocks. That was one of their behaviors. And the Marines would sometimes throw the rocks back, and then they'd throw them back and forth and back and forth. At one point, there was a really nasty encounter with these, where the Marines panicked, started shooting these poor things, and wiped out a whole bunch of them. There is anecdotal evidence, and at least one fellow who is still alive who saw one of these things loaded onto a helicopter. That helicopter was destined to end up where Frank Hansen was at that time in Vietnam. So if we look back in history, that there is this historical record on these things in Vietnam, dating back into the 1800s, with French explorers, French priests, with some Portuguese people. And again, I've got lots and lots of names and years and what have you going back. If anybody wants that, they can contact me personally. And I want to go out on a limb here and say, unlike a lot of people who hide behind emails and text messages, I don't mind being contacted by people. If you're legitimate, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have anything at all, I'd like to hear. I'd like to get this thing at least cleared up enough so people aren't running around saying, "Oh no, it was just a fake. Oh no, it was just a fake." I've seen fakes. I've done fakes. I've been involved in things with sideshows over the years. Not that I had, but that other people had. Mr. and Mrs. Mercy, who were two of the big sideshow people with Royal American, were very close friends of mine. So I learned so much from these folks. And a big thank you to them. They're long deceased. Almost certainly these were Vietnamese rock apes, and that's what this was. Almost certainly it is a non-human hominid, and this was a relic population, perhaps related to what Myra Shackley called the Almas in the Mongolian area. Myra actually tracked the Almas for quite a while and did a lot of good work over there. She's an interesting writer. I would suggest getting her books and taking a look at it. A lot of stuff has appeared in books regarding the Iceman and regarding me. And about the only thing that's correct is the spelling of my name. The lady, there's a lady named Valerie Chernin who did a couple of books, and she's about the only one who got it right. And sadly, I think she misspelled my name, but that's not important. Again, I'm not important. And let's just back up to a concept here. I have a bronze dragon. Do they exist? Here's a bronze dragon, right? No matter how I package it, no matter how I wrap it up, no matter what I do with it, when I take all the wrappings off of it, it's still a bronze dragon. This is the way we need to start approaching science. I don't care about your beliefs. Your beliefs aren't important to me. My beliefs aren't important to you when it comes to science. And I will keep repeating that. Beliefs belong in church. Okay. So this is probably the genesis of all of this. Hansen saw the thing. Hansen may have paid a few shekels to one of the Marines for it. Likely it came over in a helicopter to where he was. He probably packed it in a body bag or had someone pack it in a body bag, got it back to the United States. Okay, why was he so antsy about this whole thing and so reluctant to admit that it was real? If he had gotten caught, even long after the fact, he would have lost his pension. And he had a pretty healthy pension because not only was it from the war, he was a pilot. And the pilots got special stuff, especially if they were in the war zone frequently. They got some sort of combat pay on top of everything else. So the last thing that he wanted was to lose that. But he could also have been criminally prosecuted for that, easily criminally prosecuted. They would have hung him out to dry for that. So he was very afraid. As far as any of the stories that he has given people, write them off. It's just complete BS. You can't even look at that. It just confuses you. People have a habit of looking at minutia and saying, oh, but this, or what about that? Or, most of that stuff isn't important. It's the big picture that really counts. Then you start narrowing it down. And that's something called logic, something that we don't really do anymore. And by God, I wish they were teaching it. If I'm teaching, one of the things I try to do is get at least some sections of critical thinking into whatever we're doing to make that happen. Now, I would like to have you ask what you think some of the people might be thinking about that I've skipped over and not gone into.
Well, I think as you pointed out, like a lot of people, that investigated this thing after the fact saw the Minnesota Iceman, and it was a replica.
Absolutely.
So anything that like it's the picture of the two guys staring at the 6-9 on the ground, right? The person over here looks at it from one way and sees a 9. The person at the other end looks at it and says it's a 6. Well, you say that this thing is an absolute real flesh and blood creature at one time because you saw the original artifact. The person standing at the other end of it that only saw the replica says that it's a fake. Well, you're both right. It just depended on when that you were looking at it. But that's the problem here is there were very few people that mattered in the scientific world. I mean, that saw the original creature.
Yeah, and the ones who saw it didn't know what they were looking at. It was just another freak on the Midway. I would like to. Another side note here. I was lucky enough to talk to one of the Marines just in the last 5 months who had been involved in some of this. Unfortunately, he would not give permission to let me use his name or much of anything else. But he gave me some good information about what they saw, what they did, and how often they would see these things. He said they were not common, but that he knew of at least 6 or 7 encounters that the Marines had with these creatures. That's a lot. That's an awful lot. And many of the Vietnamese regulars said the same thing, that they would run into them here, there, and so forth. This creature was probably a teenager from the looks of him. I don't know that it would have gotten much bigger, but it had the appearance of a younger animal. And one thing that has struck me is that there is a monkey. We talk about animals evolving into effective creatures for their particular environment. There's a monkey found right in this area that is snub-nosed, very similar to what you see on this creature. I don't know. Maybe that gives it even a little more validity, that for whatever reason, snub-nosed creature has better survival, better eating, better finding, whatever it might be. But that was very, very weird to find out and know that was going on as well. again, if there was any way of getting a little bit of tissue or blood, as old as it might be, we still might be able to get something out of it. I work in DNA and RNA quite frequently, and epigenetics now, thank God they've finally figured that out. If there was any chance of getting that, I'd trade my best tennis shoes. I really would.
So you had said that you knew where the name escapes me already. The guy that had it.
Frank Hansen.
Yep.
Yeah.
You knew where he lived at the time. Do you, by any chance, know if that property still exists? Has it been destroyed? If let's say this thing had been buried or something on the property, is there any way that you could still talk to the current owner and see?
I guarantee you it was not buried on the property, because several people witnessed him driving off with it. Okay. So wherever it went to, it's gone. And knowing Hansen and knowing how paranoid he was almost certainly destroyed in one form or another. His son would be probably the only possibility, and he would have to be approached really with kid gloves, because his son, I believe, is a lawyer. And I don't know. I wish I had better news on the story ending the way it does, but it is what it is. It was there. We saw it. We did everything but touch it. I looked at it from every angle that I could see. Mark Hall, at one point, who was a so-called cryptozoologist, self-branded, said that it was impossible that I could have seen certain things on it, because I claimed that I had gotten Hansen to turn it over. He never turned it over. The thing was in a position, though, where if you got at the right angles and you used a mirror here and there, you could see things more clearly, or see things that were not readily available to normal vision. I had a couple of little mirrors that I used to jockey around on the thing. That's how I got to see some of the stuff that was at the back of the head. So anyhow, I encourage people to do two things. One is, if you think you want to pursue a career looking for things that may or may not exist, you better have a very thick skin. And number two, don't fall into the trap of the true believer or the true doubter. Look at things and say, what if? What if? Is it possible? Somebody comes up to me and says, hey, there's a bum down there who's got a diamond. He says it's the Hope Diamond. Okay, if it's close enough, I'm going to go take a look at it. You never know. You just never know. A person's stature, whether it be financial, whether it be educational, has nothing to do with whether or not they might have something. There are way too many things. And
Terry, we have a question. Wanted to know, have you ever actually attempted to talk to Hansen's son?
No, I haven't. I pretty much gave up on the whole thing for, damn near 50 years. I was so disgusted and discouraged. The only talk I ever did was with Grover Krantz. Grover was a PhD from Washington who was working on the Sasquatch. Very nice man, and really knew his stuff. He was a good anatomist. He and I talked about it a lot. And he invited me to talk at a Bigfoot conference that they had there. And I'll tell you a very short anecdote. There were representatives there from the Skeptical Inquirer and also from the National Enquirer. And one of the first things I said is, I'm glad to see that we have representatives from both these august publications. And I said, really, the only difference between the two is the size of the format. Well, the guy from the National Enquirer laughed. The guys from the Skeptical Inquirer did not. So, so much for that. It's true. You're not going to get to the bottom of anything or find anything if you're sure that it doesn't exist, and all you're doing is trying to prove that it doesn't exist. Don't try to prove it exists. Don't try to prove it doesn't exist. Examine what you've got, and then make informed decisions, and then bring somebody else in. Bring another pair of eyes, another pair of ears, before you do that.
Absolutely.
We need that.
Mm-hmm. Always keep an open mind.
Very much so.
All right, guys. If you guys have any other questions for Terry about the whole Minnesota Iceman situation and stuff, and anything that we've talked about on today's show, or maybe something you missed and would like to have clarified, please put them in the comments on wherever you're watching this show. Terry, obviously we've talked about the whole rock ape situation and where you believe this thing came from and that, but can you touch a little bit on, a lot of people, before I heard you talk and everything, I was under the same impression that this may have been what people consider a Bigfoot. And obviously we've touched on this already, but can you kind of give a little bit of a why this thing isn't, or why you don't think it is?
Well,
or if you do think it is.
I don't think it is. I don't think it has anything to do with it. This animal is not anything like the alleged Bigfoot. As I've said to you, Bigfoot is a puzzle. Sasquatch is a definite puzzle. We've got almost nothing in terms of solid evidence other than a single film that some people think is legit, some people don't. I am particularly interested in that film. I've looked at it time and time again, and looked for base marks and things that would give me a clue as to whether or not it was real. It's very convincing. That's what I'll say about it. But this thing has all the earmarks of another species of Homo. There's no two ways about it. And it had so many things that we would consider anomalous. It's impossible for it to be, for instance, a hypertrichotic human. Hypertrichosis is where you've got excessive hair on the body and so forth. And the patterns with hypertrichotic humans almost always include the face. The face is just hair covered. The lion boy, the dog boy, so forth, people that had that condition. The stories that we got from some of the Vietnamese people, the stories, that reminds me. Search for the red ape. Could you bring that one up real quickly, please? That's important.
Mm-hmm.
John McKinnon is a really smart man who has spent almost his entire life in Malaysia, Indonesia, and that area. He saw footprints of these things on at least one occasion. He wrote about them in this book. I am going to try to get in touch with him before he completely ages out, like so many other people have in this whole mess. He's a brilliant man, and he has spent years and years around the orangs and other things, and he knows his tracks. He knows them very, very well. And this, he flat out said, this must be what they call the rock ape. They've got a number of names for it. I don't want to go into the Vietnamese and Malaysian names. He's important. He's very, very important. He's just a superb zoologist. He really is. You read some of his books, you get quite an education.
You obviously, like you said, you had a very good look at this thing. One of the things that you didn't mention is, there's a difference in the appendages of different types of creatures. For example, like humans versus the great apes and stuff. When you're looking at the feet and the hands of these of the Iceman, was the feet similar to like a human or like an orang with an opposable big toe?
No,
and same with the hands.
The feet were all toes pointing straight forward.
Okay.
They were hominid feet.
Okay.
The hands were also hominid, but the thumbs were not as opposable, and the fingers were actually somewhat delicate for the size and the build of the creature. That would argue that it was perhaps a vegetarian or mostly vegetarian animal, good for picking, grabbing, what have you. The body and the trunk, the legs, the arms were quite muscular. It lived in a mountainous situation, if it is what I think it is, and it would be built that way. And lots and lots of scars from when you're in a rocky, mountainous place. That's what happens. You accumulate those.
Very good.
So does that answer?
It does. Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
We have a few more slides here if you want to go through them, or if there's
Sure,
anything you want to say about. Okay.
Yep.
With your permission, I can share these on our Facebook page as well, if that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So if
And again,
anybody wants to see any of these up close, I will put them on the Monday Morning Monsters with Barnaby Jones Facebook page, and you guys can go check those out, and I'll share it across our other platforms as well for you. So go ahead, Terry.
You can just run through here. This is a lady who actually was a fairly famous person. She drew off of Huvelman's photographs. She drew a pretty nice representation of the creature. She worked on it for a long time. The lady was quite well known. She did not only did she do museum work, but she also was in the entertainment field, something of an actress. So go ahead. Here we have something from Wisconsin with Sanderson. The Batutut is the Vietnamese name for this creature, or one of the names. Go ahead. This is them making the fake one in the book Punks, etc. How they did it and what it was. That's Frank Hansen in his elder years. And there he's standing in front of the carcass, or at that point in time, I'm sure it was a fake inside the freezer. Go ahead. That is the translation. Now, the man who translated Huvelman's book, and it's only partial, was LeBlond. Paul LeBlond was the guy who did a lot of work on various sea creatures. He was also an expert on waves and wave patterns. A nice man. I knew him quite well. Next, please.
So is this the picture on the cover here? Is that the actual picture that he took?
Yeah, this is the actual Iceman. Another thing that's interesting is when Sanderson and Huvelman saw it, they couldn't see the teeth. Well, what happens is when they would flood this thing with water, the ice, as it froze, would draw things together. So it actually closed the mouth on the animal. I was lucky to see the thing with at least part of the mouth open and exposed.
Very cool. If you guys want to take a look at this, we'll put them up on the Facebook page.
Just a little. These are some quotes out of Huvelman's. These are some photos taken for the article that Sanderson did for Argosy magazine.
So then are these the original, or is this the fake in these pictures?
They are the original.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. You can kind of see the teeth on this one down here.
That may be the fake.
Okay.
That's almost certainly the fake. There, some of this stuff got mixed up over the years, but that's the fake.
Auction on eBay page.
Yeah.
Apparently, you can buy your own Iceman.
Yep. That's the original description that he does. That is a really good thing to have, that graph. That really answers a lot of questions anatomically. Not a good representation of the toes, but gives you the basic idea. Again, standing in front of the freezer, probably with the fake. Artist representation. Argosy cover. And that's the Argosy article, which I do have a preserved copy of. There again is a drawing based on Sanderson's work with it. Top is the actual, bottom is interpretation, artist interpretation. Same thing here. Same thing here. That's Ivan Sanderson looking down at it.
And that's the end of them.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Very cool. I have one more question here in the comments. Robert wants to know, do you think that the government is covering up the rock apes? Like you had said that it was illegal for them to cross state lines with the carcass, but do you think there was anything more going on with that?
Oh, I don't know. I am loath to put conspiracy against anything, although I will also tell you that conspiracies do exist, and I unfortunately was the butt of one of them. I think that during the war, nobody listened to the GIs, and almost every report was written off as the guys had too much ganja to smoke, or they were doing heroin or something, which was really a discredit to the people who were risking their lives over there. They were under horrible conditions, but nobody is going to mistake one of those rock apes for something else, or a langur monkey, for instance. All the behaviors and everything were so completely different and very hominid behaviors, not ape behaviors, and certainly not monkey behaviors. A good ethologist or a good primate ethologist would be able to comment more on that than I would, but I can tell you that for certain. And I also want to again thank you, Barnaby, for the opportunity to do this and Absolutely. To get the real world out there. And again, folks, you are welcome to get in contact with me if you have further questions, would like more information. I'd be happy to provide it. Science should be about sharing, not about pulling everything close to you and not letting anybody else see it. That's what happened to the Hobbit people. I'm hoping that most people these days are familiar with the Hobbit people that were discovered in Indonesia. The state anthropologist or archaeologist confiscated all the bones from the Australians who discovered these things and locked them away and claimed they didn't exist. Then later on claimed that they were nothing but anomalies. They were freaks, all of which was true. All of which was not true. I'm sorry. And the Australians had to go back and do another dig, and they came up with 12 more skeletons of an animal that didn't exist. That's what happens in science. Jealousy, arrogance. It shouldn't be that way. They should be sharing information, not acting like they're kingdom builders. Everybody holding their little kingdom.
Definitely. Terry, we got the graphic up there for the Dragonwood Wildlife Conservancy. If you guys can go and support them, make a donation to them and all the great work they do for herpetology and the little scaly critters that they got there. Terry, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what is the best way that they can do that?
Do it through the Facebook, and then make sure you give a phone number, and I'll get back to you. I will not text people, and I don't like emails. If I'm going to answer a question, I want to be able to answer it accurately and be able to talk back and forth so that there's no misunderstandings. There's a lot to be said for the tone and timbre of a human being's voice. We are primates. We are vocal and visual and tactile primates. We were never designed to communicate by text messages. So there.
Absolutely.
Barnaby, it's been a pleasure. And, sometime we'll have to do this again. I've been involved in a number of different things that you would consider cryptozoological. And I also wanted to say to my Dragonwood followers, we put your link up on all of our Facebook and whatever the other one is.
Instagram.
Yeah, it's Instagram with an explanation. Please support Barnaby's efforts as well, so that add another 10 or 20,000 people to him. It's good because this is an exchange of information. This is what we need. We need to talk. We need to learn. We need to support each other. Thank you, everyone.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Please, everyone, stay healthy.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Monday Morning Monsters. And thank you very much, Terry, for taking time. And also, T, express my gratitude to T as well there with you for letting you use his laptop.
He's the best.
And, absolutely. Also, go support the Milwaukee Paracon for T.
Right.
That's every October. So go check that out. It's a great event.
And the Krampus Festival.
And Krampus, correct.
Yeah,
yep.
T has a very fun Krampus Festival that he does in early winter. And it's really great. They have a parade. They've got costumes. They've got vendors. They've got music. It's great.
Absolutely. So thank you, Terry. Thank you, T. And until next time, guys, we'll see you out there.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.